Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here today. My name is Erin Turbot. I'm the Public Information Officer with the Department of Workforce Services, and I am so excited to welcome you to today's virtual training series. You are not alone. Navigating mental health, substance use, and suicide concerns for yourself and others. This series was created based on your feedback, and we're excited to bring you topics that matter most to you. Be sure to check out our website at dws.wyo.gov/VTS. We'll drop that link in the chat for upcoming sessions, registration, and recordings of past events. Today's session is being recorded, and all materials will be available on our site within a few days. If you have questions during this presentation, pop them into chat, and we will get them answered for you just as we go. Now, let's dive in. Please join me in welcoming today's speakers. Tracy Rassley is the Programs Manager for the Montana and Wyoming chapters of the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, and Brittany Wardle, the Community Prevention Project Director from the Cheyenne Regional Medical Center. Brittany and Tracy, welcome.
Thank you so much for having us here today. We're looking forward to talking about mental health, substance use, and suicide with the group. So as was mentioned, please feel free to pop any thoughts or questions into the chat, and I will get us started here. So one of the models we always start with is a model that I really appreciate from SAMHSA, which is the Federal Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. Sometimes when we think about our well-being, especially this time of year, we think about our physical health, we think about our mental health, but that might be as far as we get. And what we know about ourselves being well is that there are many dimensions to that. And this is something that can ebb and flow for us just based on the things that are happening in our life and the things we're experiencing. So it really is about seeking balance across these 8 dimensions, which we'll talk about. But one of the most important things we know is really that we need others to make it through life. So we'll talk about what that looks like as well. And then you guys know, right? How many of you have been in a meeting where everyone sat in the same seat every time they were in the meeting room, right? We love our routines, we love our habits. And so embracing that in a way that can support our well-being is also really essential. So we're going to dive into these 8 dimensions and talk about the components of each of them as you kind of think about your own life and where maybe you're feeling really good and where you feel like, hey, this has been a tough area for me, something that I might want to improve. So one of the most obvious ones we talk about first is physical wellness. I always think of this as the stuff the doctor tells you to do, right? Or not to do. So you go in and they tell you, are you drinking water? Are you exercising? Are you eating the right foods? Are you staying away from substances? And how's your sleep, right? And we all as adults kind of go, yeah, right? We know these things are important, but it's not always something we're super interested in doing something about. But it really is key to us feeling well overall. The things we want to pay attention to are we moving our bodies in a way that we enjoy? And sleep is a big one. Somehow there are still studies being conducted. You guys, I don't know how they're getting funding that say, they come out and they say sleep is so important. I think we all know that, right? So sleep is really key, making sure that we are practicing good sleep hygiene, whether it's going to a sleep mask or putting on white noise, but those things are really important. And then we think about our physical health as it relates to substance use and how our physical health might be impacted by the substances we're using. One of the most common substances we see here in Wyoming is alcohol. And alcohol, remember, is a depressant. So we want to pay attention to how our emotional health is feeling when we're choosing to consume alcohol. And then we also know that tobacco and other drugs can not only affect our physical health, but how we're feeling in other dimensions as well. So just paying attention to those times when maybe you might be prone to using substances more than other times. I'm thinking like holiday dinners with families, right? Might be a time where we consume more than we should because we're stressed about hanging out with our families. So just pay attention to that. And then preventive medicine, right? A lot of us will hardly go to the doctor when we're feeling sick, but are we doing those things that help keep us well? Our screenings, right? Who can get excited about mammograms and colonoscopies? Probably not anyone here. Maybe a few of you, but those things are really important for us to do. And we want to make sure that we are putting aside the time to take care of our physical health in that way. Then we think about intellectual wellness. Are we taking time to exercise our brain? You guys are all at work, right? So you're like, yes, we're sitting here listening and learning, we're working. But it's also our personal interests that we're pursuing outside of work, right? What are we reading? What are we learning? Are you doing the Wordle every day? Are you doing the crossword? And if so, I applaud you. I don't have the skills for that. But we've got to keep our exercise not limited to our physical body, but also to our mind, right? We have to stimulate our brain in the same way that we exercise our body. And that's really important. And are we having conversations with people and growing through those? So really a key component of our wellness is exercising our brain, especially as we age, just making sure that we continue to stimulate that growth in our brain. This next one, you guys, this is usually not a fan favorite to talk about, right? Raise your hand if you love to talk about money. I can't see the hands, but I'm sure there's only a few of them up, if any at all. This is a really key one also, and especially I think we feel the impact of maybe poor financial decisions this time of year because there are a lot of expenses that come up during the holidays, whether it's travel or gifts or things we're trying to take care of as winter comes on. So money is often something we don't think about as being really tied to our health. The important thing to remember, right, is if you've ever had a stress, right, an emergency expenditure, you've felt that in your body, the stress of, ooh, can I afford these 4 new tires I suddenly need? Or this medical expense that is coming from this unexpected visit. So we know that financial wellness can be a significant contributor, especially as we think about mental health and even further down that road if we're talking about suicide prevention. Our ability to take care of ourselves and to take care of others with financial means is really important. So we want to pay attention to how we're saving, how we're thinking about spending our money. I did propose an idea for all the nurses that said they were spending too much money at the coffee shop in the hospital. I was like, you guys, what if we tried an experiment where we all brought our coffee from home? And I've never been booed so loudly. So, you know, it's important to do things that you are into and you're willing to do. So if it's not bringing coffee from home, I get it. But those are the things we want to pay attention to when we're talking about financial wellness. So let's talk about our environment for a minute. So this isn't just, are we spending time in nature? Are we spending time in the outdoors, which we know is really good for us? But let's talk about our work environment. I would love to hear from you guys. Throw it in the chat, right? What makes a work environment good for you? What supports you feeling like you are well in your work environment? I'll throw out a couple of things to consider. We think about our use of time off or vacation time. And what we know about our environment is that our environment can impact how we act and how well we are. One example is if you have a boss that says, vacation time is very important, you should always use it, and your boss never takes vacation themselves, is that communicating a well work environment? Probably not, right? We want to set the example if we're a leader in our organization that, hey, taking time off is valued and taking care of yourself in that time is valued. So making sure that that's something we're supporting in our work environment. This can also be, hey, we're working in a place that doesn't maybe have many windows and we haven't been outside all day. Taking 10 minutes to walk around outside. I wouldn't do it today, right? It's a little windy out. But making sure that we're taking time outside if we're kind of stuck in a place that isn't really supportive of well-being. Oh, you guys are hitting on some good one. Team activities, effective communication, and a positive work culture. I love that. Those are all things that make us well in our space where we're working. So pay attention to that, right? Because our environment can really impact how well we are. And we notice when we've been stuck inside all day and haven't been outside. Or when, you know, maybe we're in a cubicle environment and we need some privacy and some space to ourselves. So make sure you're listening to your body. And as leaders in your organization, make sure that you are encouraging a culture that lets people take care of themselves, right? Especially where the environment is concerned. So we have another one here, spiritual wellness. And spiritual is a very broad category here. So, right, this can be everything from organized religion, which we know can be a huge protective factor for people with their mental health, to just identifying and finding purpose and meaning in your life, what your core beliefs are and how you align with that. So we know that spending time and identifying with a higher purpose is really meaningful for us as humans. So taking time to make sure that we're connecting to a larger purpose can be really helpful. Social wellness is a really big one in mental health. So we think about spending time with people. And sometimes what we'll hear is, oh, like I don't love to be around people and I could be a hermit in my basement and be totally fine not seeing another human ever. And we know, we all feel like that sometimes. But the truth is, we cannot survive without other humans. Our relationships with others are hugely important, not just for our mental health, but also these other dimensions of health, right? So when we think about our communities and where we spend time, that can be everything from a pickleball crew to trivia night at a brewery or a walking club or whatever, right? But it's really key that we are engaging with other people. And we think about this, sometimes people are like, well, I don't have 200 friends. But what we really mean here is absolutely quality over quantity, right? We need really supportive people and strong relationships, but we don't need 200 of them. So it's important to remember that even a small circle can hold a lot of power for us in our social wellness. And it is important to remember that also we can overextend ourselves in this dimension, right? Especially this time of year when there's 200 events or concerts or parties we need to pop around to. So also not taking it to the extreme. And if you feel like I really can't take on another social event, that's absolutely okay too. As I mentioned, it's an ebb and flow, and you have to give yourself some grace sometimes when you aren't feeling up to spending a lot of time with other people. But just acknowledging that those relationships you have and engaging in them is really important. So occupational wellness, right? Back to our work site stuff here. Occupational wellness is important because we spend a lot of time, right, in our occupations. We spend a lot of time with the people at our work. We spend a lot of time physically where we work. And balance can be really important in that. Sometimes a great example, you guys, is in healthcare, right? I've heard nurses say, I spent all day, that's a 12-hour shift. All day I didn't eat, I didn't go to the bathroom. And people are responding like, that's amazing, great job. And I'm thinking, this is terrible, right? This is not the kind of culture we want to support where people can't even take care of their basic needs. So we want to kind of flip the script on those kinds of things. We want to make sure when people come back from vacation that we're supportive about it. Like, hey, how was your trip? Did you recharge in your time off? What did you enjoy doing? And also making sure that we are supporting people when they accomplish things, right? And offering some of that encouragement when people are struggling at work, because we know that those are all things that matter. And one of the risks we see present in occupations, specifically as it relates to both substance use and suicide, is when people are struggling at work, right? So let's make sure that we are reaching out to them. Let's make sure we're offering support if we see someone struggling and keeping that top of mind, because oftentimes when things are not going well in our chosen occupation, right? Or if we're experiencing discipline at work, we know that other dimensions in our wellness circle are not well either. So keying in on that when you see that with others. And then our emotional wellness. So how are we experiencing our feelings? Are we taking care of ourselves? And are we handling our stress well? Again, this is something that can really ebb and flow based on what you're experiencing personally, professionally, but we want to pay attention, because sometimes it's important for us to say, if we're headed into work and we're already grumpy, right? I've come in sometimes and I've said, hey, you guys, I'm having a really hard day. It has nothing to do with anyone here. So just putting that out there, communicating with people when you're like, hey, I need some space, right? Because taking care of yourself is really important and can be something, again, this time of year, that we spend a lot of time taking care of everyone else and not as much time taking care of ourselves. So let's talk about stress for a minute, right? Stress can be good and it can also be bad. So What we know is that stress is a buildup of hormones in our body, and that's either to a perceived threat or a real threat, right? There's no difference to our body. If we perceive it, it might as well be real. So it can really give us an inclination to respond in a way that's either freeze, flight, or fight. So we want to pay attention when we're experiencing those emotions. Again, perceived challenges or challenges that are actual challenges, because again, our body reacts the same way. So when we think about positive stress, that can help motivate us, right? I think back to turning in papers, right, in college. Positive stress, like I have to get this done. I don't have a choice. And that can be really useful in giving us the motivation we need to get something done on a deadline, right? But what we know is that stress, especially chronic or over the long term, can be really bad for us in multiple dimensions, right? We can feel it physically in our bodies. Sometimes I ask people, when you're having the feeling of anxiety, how in your body do you feel that, right? Because our physical body can manifest how we're feeling mentally as well. And you hear things like butterflies, or I feel like throwing up, right? So those are instances where we can feel in our body that we're stressed or we're anxious. And especially if that goes on for long periods of time, if we're worried about finances, right? If we've lost our job, if we're working with people that are going through this and having these experiences, that can affect multiple areas of their wellness. We might see emotional distress. We might see behavioral changes. So stress can be sometimes good, but also sometimes bad. So I, again, want to call out that we want to pay attention to where in our bodies we're feeling that stress, because it's different for everyone, right? And it's different based on the scenario that's happening. But sometimes it can show up in that I can't concentrate on a single task. I'm too stressed that I keep jumping around and nothing's getting done. Or I can have headaches, or I can have back pain. I can feel sick in my stomach. And then we can also see people maybe coping in ways that aren't productive, right? Like increasing our substance use. So these are all common reactions that we can see when people are experiencing stress. So let's talk about you guys. I'm going to stop sharing my screen here for a minute, and someone's going to throw in the chat. We have a Mentimeter. This isn't going to attach to your name, so feel free to be honest. What are the sources of stress for you in your life right now? What is contributing to stress in your life today? So we're going to pull up a different screen here in just a minute, but I would love for you guys to look in the chat for that link and just share with us, and you can respond more than once, what those sources of stress are for you. And I am going to share my screen here. Once I figure it out, you guys, I promise, so you can see what I'm seeing. Okay. I always get really stressed just looking at this word cloud, you guys. It's a very stressful word cloud. There's a lot here, right? I see a lot about finances. You guys probably felt like thumbsing down that financial wellness domain. That's really stressful. The holidays, right? Oh, family, relationships, those are all really challenges. Physical injuries, health, retirement, time. So I think sometimes stress can have us feeling very isolated, right? Like maybe we're the only ones that are experiencing what we're experiencing. And oftentimes when we look at what our coworkers are saying and what's stressing them out, it reminds us that, hey, everyone's got stress in their life. And sometimes it's even the same stress that we have, right? Parenting, I definitely feel that. I had some arguments about pants this week, and it's always 5 minutes before you're trying to get someone to leave for school, right? So I will share the word cloud so you can keep entering. But I'm going to keep moving through the slides so I don't hog all of Tracy's time too. But what we can see here is there's a lot of stress happening, right? For everyone, there's a lot of stress that's happening. So we want to make sure that we pay attention to that. Okay, can someone give me a thumbs up that you can see the screen I'm sharing? Yes. Yay, a thumbs up. Thank you. You guys are the best. So we talked about those sources of stress. So what can we do about it, right? What are some of the coping strategies we can use? I wasn't just going to have you guys share all the bad things and not talk about coping, I promise. So just a reminder, everyone has stresses. We want to make sure that as much as possible, we are trying to cope in a productive way, right? Because there are a lot of ways we can cope that are not so productive. And when we think about coping, there are really two kinds of ways to think about it. One is emotion-focused coping. So this can be really useful when we don't have a lot of control over what's going on. A great example is the holidays, right? You have family that's coming on and coming over. Could you tell them no? Maybe, but oftentimes we don't feel like we can, right? So instead of thinking about problem-focused coping, some ways that I might cope if I've got, an evil father-in-law. I don't, but just as an example, right? I have an evil father-in-law. Everyone's trying to make it an evil mother-in-law, so I'm just changing it up for you guys, right? And he loves to tell me what to do in the kitchen and boss me around and tell me all the things I'm doing wrong. So if I'm emotion-focused coping, because I know I'm going to have to spend time with him, I can't change that. I might be complaining to my sister and saying, oh, I'm really frustrated. I hate when he comes. I feel micromanaged. I don't like how he hassles me in the kitchen. I'm venting, right? Which can be really helpful. I can get social support. She can say, that's terrible. I'm so sorry. But I feel heard, right? Because I've shared my frustration. I've shared my feelings. I can't necessarily solve the problem, but I'm focused on those negative emotions I'm experiencing as a result of the problem. So that can be really useful when we can't maybe change the circumstance or change what's going on or don't have a lot of control. So that can be really useful. You're just venting, right? And then that's all you got. You're going to vent and you're going to get through it. Sometimes we have more control over the problem, right? So if we have problem-focused coping, that means we have some options at our disposal to solve that problem. So we're frustrated, but we might be able to say, hey, I really have a hard time with my father-in-law, but we're going to their house. So I'm only going to stay there for an hour, right? And I'm not going to go into the kitchen where he is trying to micromanage me historically, right? So I'm going to stay out in the living room and I'm going to leave after 1 hour, right? So that might be an instance where I have control over that problem. And sometimes we might have a problem that has the ability to have both of those coping strategies used, right? We might have some control and we might have the ability to also vent some of that stress out with our support network. So those are two ways to start thinking about a problem. Like, is this something I can control or not? And then going with either emotion-focused coping or problem-focused. Implementing steps to solve that problem in a way that's going to be helpful for you and manage some of that stress. So additional coping strategies we always want to talk about. You guys, again, with the doctor stuff, they tell you, right? Taking care of yourself and your body. A big one, I think, is your willingness and vulnerability in terms of sharing your problems with others and sharing your feelings. Yuck, I know some people hate that, but it's really important, right? We want to make sure that we are seeking out that support when we need it and telling people, hey, this is how I'm feeling. I need some support or I'm really struggling. Another important thing when we're not having, when we're not in a good place, right, can be avoiding drugs and alcohol, because sometimes they mask some of those short-term things that we're feeling, right? We feel less stressed or we feel like we can ignore it for a bit while we're using substances. But what we know is they often end up having us feel worse, right? So we want to pay attention to if we're struggling, trying to avoid substances. And then this last one here, recognizing when you need more help. I work with a lot of folks that work in helping professions, and they are some of the worst, you guys, at recognizing when they need more help. And we as humans aren't great at asking for help when we need it, right? So be willing to exercise that muscle as well. I ask people often when I'm talking to them as a group, like, how many of you are willing to commit to asking for help even if it's for a small thing, in the next month. By a show of thumbs up, you guys, who's willing to do that? Even if it's just a tablespoon of sugar from your neighbor next door, right? Ask for help when you need it. Yay! A couple of you are willing to ask for help in the next month. We have to remember that our asking for help muscles are the same as other muscles, right? We have to exercise them and we hate to do it. But you have to remember when you ask for help from others, it actually serves a purpose for them too. People benefit physically and mentally from helping other people. So just remember, you are helping others when you ask for help for yourselves. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Tracy.
So this is my portion of the presentation. And just as a reminder, I'm going to be talking about some of those difficult things. We're going to talk about suicide prevention. We're going to talk about our mental health. And so if you need to take a step away for a second, please feel free to do so. But just make sure that you are taking care of yourself during this time. So just like physical health, we all have mental health. Mental health includes our emotional, psychological, and social well-being. And the brain plays a big role in our mental health. And sometimes we forget that the brain is an organ in our body that needs to be taken care of. Research shows that most people who die by suicide have a mental health condition at the time of their death. It may or may not be recognized by the person or their loved ones, and it may not have been diagnosed or may not be adequately treated. However, research has also made it very clear that mental health conditions are not the entire story. 1 in 4 people will experience a mental health condition, and most do not go on to die by suicide. Okay. So, how we talk about suicide truly does matter. We want to avoid referring to attempts as failed or successful. These words imply judgment and are completely unnecessary. We also want to avoid the phrase committed suicide. This phrase brings up negative stereotypes for many people. Instead, we want to use phrases like died by suicide, ended their life, or a suicide attempt. And terms that we use to describe individuals who have lost someone to suicide, those are suicide loss survivor, survivor of suicide loss, suicide bereaved, and bereaved by suicide. And when we want to refer to a person who has made a suicide attempt or struggles with suicidal ideation, we describe them as someone with lived experience. And when that someone has made a suicide attempt, we might also say that they are a suicide attempt survivor. Another thing to remember about suicide prevention is we want to avoid sharing graphic details about suicide methods, since this can be very activating for those who struggle and can cause a contagion. We also need to avoid minimizing suicide to one single reason or cause, since many factors play a role in all suicide deaths. I truly believe when suicide is talked about safely and accurately, we can reduce judgment and stigma around suicide and encourage people at risk to seek help. Okay. So all populations are affected by suicide, but there are many factors that contribute to differences in suicide rates for different populations. These include things like access to healthcare and support, experiencing marginalization, or access to lethal means like firearms. And while at a population level, some communities experience more negative conditions or factors that increase risk for suicide, identifying as part of any of these communities does not mean that an individual is inherently at risk of dying by suicide. So this slide shows some of those differences so that they can just be in the forefront of your mind. Males have higher rates of suicide than females. Females have higher rates of attempt. Middle-aged and older adults have higher rates of suicide than younger people. And fortunately, younger statistics are actually increasing at this time. Veterans have higher rates of suicide than non-veterans, and suicide rates are 3 times higher in homes where there are firearms than those without. And this is important to remember, especially in Wyoming, where we do have a high proportion of firearm ownership. We do have a high veteran population. Okay. So When someone dies by suicide, people may see a life event or stressor like losing a job, a breakup, bad grades, and assume that that event caused the suicide. But this is not how it works. There is truly no one single cause of suicide. Behind the scenes, there are multiple risk factors that converge to contribute to the risk of suicide. These factors may or may not be noticeable and include biological, psychological, social, and environmental factors. Okay. Suicide is the result of multiple factors. Studies show that individuals who die by suicide have an average of 7 to 10 risk factors present at the time of their death. And the risk factors, which are shown on this screen in red circles, include things like mental health conditions, substance use. In contrast, protective factors, which are shown here in blue circles, include things like social support, engaging in mental health care, and problem-solving skills. It's important to note that many of these factors are modifiable and are key targets for presenting suicide. If a person with increased suicide risk has access to lethal means, the outcome can be fatal. And so that's why reducing access to lethal means can be the difference between life and death. And while current life events can play a role in suicide, it's important to remember that most people who experience hardship do not become suicidal. And even among those who think about suicide, most do not act on those thoughts. An effective approach to suicide prevention involves the reduction of risk factors and the enhancement of protective factors. Okay. So it's important to remember that millions of people have thoughts of suicide each year, but most do not go on to attempt suicide. Thoughts of suicide do not necessarily lead to suicidal behaviors, but suicidal thoughts always signal distress that needs support and professional evaluation. Okay. When a person reaches a moment of crisis, thinking becomes constricted, causing a state of intense tunnel vision. In that moment, the person is truly unable to consider other options or use their coping skills. They can't foresee a time when the unbearable pain, whether that's physical or psychological, that they are in will ever end. And they may become focused on suicide as the only way to end their pain. Okay. Again, thoughts of suicide are often temporary. Research provides clear evidence that in a moment of crisis, time and distance can be life-saving. Time for the intense crisis moment to pass, time for someone to intervene with mental health support and resources, and distance between an individual who is experiencing this painful moment and the method for ending their life. Okay. So the first step in suicide prevention is to watch for warning signs. And while suicide risk factors often endure over a longer period of time, warning signs are observable signs that someone may be suicidal in that moment. So, for example, high blood pressure or high cholesterol are ongoing risk factors that may increase your chances of heart attack, while chest pain is the warning sign because it signals that a heart attack is likely happening right now. And the suicide warning signs are typically displayed in three main ways. Those are how we talk, how we behave, and our mood. So we can look at the list on the slide and take note of some of the common warning signs. So many people are surprised to learn that those who experience thoughts of suicide often talk about it. It's important to listen for different phrases like having no reason to live or being a burden, feeling trapped, or being in unbearable pain, rather than simply, I want to kill myself. But sometimes people do speak about ending their life and they talk about it in a joking manner. I truly encourage you to take those comments seriously and use them as an opportunity to have an open conversation every time. When we are talking about behavior, if you notice someone acting differently than they usually do, you want to speak to the person about what you're noticing. You may see increased alcohol or drug use. They may have trouble sleeping. Brittany already spoke about how important sleeping is, and it truly is. Either they have trouble falling asleep, trouble staying asleep, or they're sleeping too much, because you can do that as well. They may start acting recklessly. They may withdraw from activities, especially those activities that they truly enjoy. They start to withdraw from family and friends. They also may start looking for ways of killing themselves. They can be searching on the internet. That could mean shopping for a firearm. It can mean hoarding medications. And they may also give away possessions. This is the one stereotype about suicide that is actually true. But the flip side of that is they may also exhibit reckless spending. So if someone's taking you out to lunch or dinner or buying you things that you know they truly can't afford, but all of a sudden they're giving you gifts or wanting to do that for you, that can be that same thing. No matter what it may be, the most important thing to look for is that change in someone's behavior from how they typically would act. And then, of course, there's mood. People at risk for suicide can also display, sometimes subtly, sometimes very overtly, any of the moods that you see on the screen. We typically think about depression, anxiety, apathy. Sometimes we don't even think about the fact that rage, irritability, impulsivity, humiliation is all a part of this, because when you really think about it, all of those moods are ones that we would expect from someone who was feeling overwhelmed or desperate. And again, we all have our ups and downs. That is not unusual. But when you notice a change that seems uncharacteristic or concerning and is consistent and is sticking around over time, it's important to speak to the person about what you're noticing. For example, a sudden unexplained upbeat mood during a period of Great Depression can actually indicate that the individual has decided on a plan for ending their life, and they're relieved that they're no longer going to be in pain. Remember, and I know that's a lot, but it never hurts to trust your gut and start a conversation about how someone is doing. Okay, so the second step to preventing suicide involves having a conversation. It's important to have a caring, supportive conversation with someone that you're worried about. Don't assume that someone else may be closer to them and will reach out and have that conversation. If you notice the warning signs, you should start that conversation. And before we go any further, I want to acknowledge how difficult, comfortable, or scary it can feel to have this type of conversation with someone. But it helps to remember that everyone has mental health, and talking about it in a non-judgmental manner shows that you're a trusted person. Even if the person that you're worried about doesn't want to get help at the time, they'll know that you are someone that they can turn to in the future if they do want to have a good conversation. Before you reach out to someone you're concerned about, I would like you to keep just a few things in mind. First, you want to avoid minimizing their feelings. Second, you want to avoid getting into any kind of debate about life being worth living. If a person is nearing a crisis point, they are not thinking clearly, and philosophical debates about life being worth living don't really tend to be any help. You want to avoid offering advice on how to fix it. We all get frustrated when someone tries to fix our problems for us, so please don't do that. And if you were talking with someone who was having a heart attack, you certainly wouldn't say, you really probably should be eating better, or you might want to be exercising more. That's really not the time. The time when they're having the heart attack is to call 911, get them the resources they need. The same is true when someone's having a mental health crisis. We want to get them the resources they need, and then we can talk about all those other things at a later date. And last, as a peer or colleague, It is not your role to diagnose or provide mental health services. Encourage the person to connect with available resources or mental health support. If they are in crisis, what they truly need is to be heard and connected with professional help. And you also want to ask to talk to the person in private. Allow them to share what they're experiencing and start with an expression of how much you care, followed by what you've observed that have brought you there. Let them know that you're not going to judge them. David, I have heard suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem. Is that an appropriate thing to say to someone contemplating suicide? It's actually really not. When we use those types of phrases, what we're telling a person is that the problems that they are in are insignificant and that they're not that big a deal. And the last thing that you want to do with a person that is in that position is to indicate to them that what they're feeling is either ridiculous or is not significant, because that makes you an unsafe person and it makes them feel like they can't talk about their feelings. So saying that it's just a temporary or a permanent solution to a temporary problem doesn't give them the feeling that you kind of are trying to imply. When we're all in a good mental health place, we all completely understand that sentiment. But when we're in a bad place and nobody understands how we feel, they truly feel like they are in a permanent problem. And so trying to indicate to them that they're not without providing them a voice doesn't particularly help them very much. And so we want to avoid doing that. So if someone tells you that they are thinking about suicide, stay calm. Just because someone is having thoughts of suicide doesn't mean that they're in immediate danger. Take the time to calmly listen to what they have to say. And I know how difficult that is because we get so worried about what we are hearing. But you want to ask some follow-up questions. So you might want to ask, do you have a plan to end your life? If they say yes, that they do have a plan, then we're a little bit further down the road. Then you want to say, hey, do you have a method? Is that method available to you? Because sometimes we think about how we might want to do that, but the method isn't available. And that is actually a very good thing because most people will not, who are in a suicidal crisis, will not change that method. So that is helpful. We want to make sure that we keep that method from them. If we know that they have whatever means they're going to use, whether that's pills or a gun or whatever, are they willing to give that lethal means to someone else for a time being? That's incredibly important. Let them know that you want to be here, you want to help them. That is the most important part of this conversation. Make sure to avoid saying things like, you have so much to live for. And think about what this would do to your spouse, your parents, your kids. One of the things that we have learned is most people who are thinking about suicide have already thought about the fact that this is going to make everyone else in my world better. This is going to be a good thing for them. I'm not going to be a problem for them anymore. And so reminding them of what it's going to do to their family is just reinforcing for them that their family is going to be better. So we want to avoid those parts of the conversation. Instead, we want to reassure them that help truly is available and that these feelings are a signal that it is time to talk to a mental health professional and to make sure that we are providing them with the avenue to express their feelings.
Tracy, excuse me. We have an
Yeah.
anonymous comment. I don't know how to post anonymously, so she sent this to the hosts and panelists. But I was having suicidal ideation a few years back, and one of my most trusted people in my life told me, I don't want to hear about that kind of stuff. I hate it when you talk like that. I 100% shut down and attempted later that night.
Yep. That is exactly that does not surprise me when you hear comments like that, because when we are talking with someone who is having suicidal ideation, or is in that crisis moment, to tell them that you don't want to talk about it, that that's too much, you're being ridiculous, all of those types of comments just make them feel even more isolated. And especially when we are talking about someone that we feel is our trusted person. Um, it doesn't surprise me that then you attempted that night. And I'm so very sorry that happened to you. That is why these conversations are so important. If someone tells you that they are struggling, it is not up to you to fix them. It is not up to you to make sure that everything is good in their world. But what you can do is say, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry you're struggling like that. I don't know how to help you, but I know 988, and 988 is a great resource for speaking with someone who has so much more information than I ever will. Even doing this on a regular basis, my fallback is always, let's call 988. Let's see what they have to say, because that's all that I'm asking. I'm not asking you to be a professional. I'm not asking you to um, make the world right. But being able to have these open, honest conversations and staying calm and getting people to the resources that they need is so incredibly important. And then here's the other part of this. When you close this conversation, you want to reiterate how glad, thankful, and honored, really, that you are to have a chance to connect on this deeper level. Because if someone is talking with you about this, they have placed a tremendous amount of trust in you. Remind them that we all have challenges at times and that you will continue to be there for them. But don't just leave it at that. We want to make sure that we follow up. So whether that's, hey, can we get together for coffee next week just to make sure that you're on the right track? Or if you don't want to schedule something in the moment, put it in your phone. We all have been in a place where we're like, you know what? I really want to check in with Tracy next week. I want to make sure I do that to make sure she's doing well. And then life happens. And we completely forget to check in with Tracy next week. And then it's a month later, and now we're feeling uncomfortable because we didn't check in. Put it in your phone. I tell people all the time, just put it a real quick note, check in with Tracy. And then when it pops up in your phone, you're like, oh my gosh, that's right. I really wanted to check in with her. Just make that a part of the habit that you have. Okay. So then the next part is to make sure that you can put time and distance between the person thinking about suicide and their way of ending their life. Research truly shows that by temporarily reducing a person's access to their lethal means will give them time to kind of have that intense suicidal risk diminish, and time for someone else to intervene with mental health support or resources. Even before someone reaches a crisis point, keeping their environment safe is a great way to proactively reduce suicide risk. We all know lethal means refers to a method that can be fatal if one uses it to attempt suicide. So limiting access to lethal means is 100% a proven method of reducing suicide. For most people in suicidal crisis, I'll say this again, if they are unable to access their chosen method, even temporarily, they are unlikely to choose an alternate means to end their life. So reducing access is a clear way to prevent suicide and limit access to lethal means. During a period of high risk, the safer someone's environment is, the better chance that person has of living through that crisis. Some examples of how one might limit access: securing medications, including over-the-counter medications, securing toxic substances such as cleaning fluids, pest sprays, all those things that live under our sink and live in our garage. A lot of times we forget about those. We want to make sure those are stored properly as well. And of course, securing firearms. All firearms should be stored securely when not in use. Nearly half of all US households have at least one firearm. In states like Wyoming, that is higher. It goes up to about 70%. If someone is at risk for suicide, having a gun in a home can be fatal. Around half of all suicides in the US involve a firearm. And in some states, again, like Wyoming, that number goes up to about 70 to 75%. Additionally, so that you understand, most firearm deaths in the United States are suicides. It's not homicide, it's not accidental shootings, it is suicides. And so making sure that we are keeping our firearms stored safely is incredibly important. So we can think of securing firearms in 3 different categories. So that is to lock, to limit, or to temporarily remove. When we talk about locking, that's when our firearms are not in use. They should be locked and unloaded. Ammunition should be locked in a separate location. When we're talking about limiting, it takes the locking a step further. So when you want to limit, you can lock your firearm in one area, lock your ammunition in another area, and in one of those instances, you don't have the combination or the key. And that kind of puts a third person into getting the pieces of the firearm together in order to use it. And then, of course, and the most effective way of preventing suicide is to temporarily remove firearms from the home. Having either the police department, a firearm shooting range, or a trusted friend hold on to your firearm when you know that someone in the home, including yourself, is having issues. You should also ask the person that you're concerned about or yourself. You should encourage them to refrain from substance use and encourage them to discuss keeping their environment safe with a mental health professional who should have more ability to have those conversations. Okay, so the fourth and final step in preventing suicide is connecting an individual to resources. If someone has a suicide plan or is in crisis and is not safe, you need to take immediate action. So whether that action is 911 or 988, there has to be something going on when you know that someone is in imminent danger. Now would be a great time to take out your phones and take a picture of this slide and add these resources to your contacts. Even if you never use them for yourself, you may need them for someone else. And I would much rather have them in my phone and never in my lifetime use them than try to desperately find them when I do need them. So I'll go through a couple of them. 988 is the National Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. 988 provides free and confidential emotional support to people in suicidal crisis or emotional distress, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. If you call on behalf of someone else, a trained counselor will provide guidance about what you should do to help the person in distress. In addition to phone access, 988 also provides text and chat options with specialty guidance for veterans and in Spanish. If you or the person that you're concerned about don't feel comfortable speaking to a counselor on the phone, another great option is to text 988 or text the crisis text line at 741-741. Again, you can do that in English or Spanish. The crisis text line also provides 24/7 high quality text-based mental health support and crisis interventions by a community of trained volunteers. 988 also offers options for individuals who are deaf or hard of hearing through text, online chat, or video phone at 988lifeline.org. So that is something that you want to keep in mind as well. There are also several resources for the LGBTQ plus community. LGBTQ plus youth may connect with crisis counselors via phone or text through the Trevor Project, the largest suicide prevention and crisis intervention organization for LGBTQ youth. And then additionally, there's the Trans Lifeline. It is a free peer-supported phone service run by trans people for trans and questioning peers. And finally, remember your local emergency department is another resource for immediate care, especially if you are at a point where you know someone has taken the steps. Another thing to remember, experience of suicide loss is a risk factor for suicide. Providing support to loss survivors is important and is another way to prevent suicide. Brittany, that's the next screen. In addition to those listed on this slide, AFSP also offers resources to support loss survivors, including Healing Conversations and the International Survivors Suicide Loss Day. Healing Conversations is a one-time visit, phone, virtual, or in person, that connects those who have lost a loved one to suicide with a trained volunteer who has also lost the same type of individual to suicide. The goal of that connection is to help recent survivors navigate this challenging journey. And then International Survivors of Suicide Loss Day is an event in which survivors of suicide loss come together to find connection, understanding, and hope through their shared experiences. You can find out anything about either of those programs at afsp.org. Survivor Day actually was in the last couple weeks. Does the 988 hotline still provide LGBTQ support for those who reach out, or just use the Trevor Project? So here's the thing. There is no longer a number. NAMI is a great resource as well. 988 no longer has push 3 for LGBTQ. They do have all the resources in front of them. However, if you have that Trevor Project number, especially for youth, that is a direct line to someone who is going to be more, not every time, but sometimes more adept at speaking to those issues that are in the forefront for LGBTQ. So the Trevor Project is now a better resource. And so the next slide is, we want to talk about, remember to be proactive about your mental health. Might be the next slide, Brittany, or then, oh, there it is. Remember to remember the protective factors that we discussed earlier. Sorry, I'm having a moment and I know I'm running late. In addition to professional mental health care, proactive self-care is truly very, very important for maintaining your mental health. Again, what I said with keeping track of someone, schedule your self-care into your phones, put it in your calendar. It's easy to forget to take care of ourselves. It's easy to feel like everything else is a bigger priority in the moment. But I promise you, if you take half hour every few days, an hour at least once a week, in order to disconnect, do what you love, whether it's something for your mind, body, soul, or surroundings, I promise you it will make you a better friend. It will make you a better worker. It will make you a better person, and you will thank yourself for it. So please make sure that you're taking care of yourself. I think that is the end of my part of the presentation.
Thank you, Brittany and Tracy. Does anybody have any questions? We can, we are reaching the end of our time here. So if anyone does have questions, please go ahead and put them in the chat. I will go on with our ending remarks. Tracy and Brittany, thank you so, so much for this presentation, for sharing your expertise and your hearts with us today. This conversation is never easy, but it's so important. And you've given us clarity, compassion, and practical tools that we can all carry forward. Your message reminds us that nobody is truly alone, whether we're navigating our own challenges or supporting someone we care about. The resources and the hope that you highlighted today will make a real difference to somebody, and we're grateful for the ways that you help our communities feel seen, supported, and connected. Thank you again for the work that you do and for guiding us through such an empowering and meaningful session. Now, before we move on, I would like to ask you all to take a survey on today's presentation. Your input helps us make these sessions even better, and we'd really appreciate your thoughts. In the next few days, we'll email you, as we always do. We'll email you the recording, slides, and handouts. Actually, I don't think there are any handouts. But while you're completing the survey, we're going to post another link. This will be the next slide, which will allow you to register for our next presentation. And this is maximizing your talent pool, the untapped benefits of hiring people with disabilities. This time you're going to join Callie Davis with DWS's vocational rehabilitation team for a fast-paced practical session on the business advantages of inclusive hiring. Learn how tax incentives, improved retention, workplace morale, simple accommodations, and real employer success stories can help you build a stronger and more resilient team. And I believe Tricia has put that link in the chat. And I do have a question that just popped up. Was this recorded and will it be available later? And yes, it will be. You're here now. Yes, it was. Let's say that. It was recorded. We will be emailing this out in the next day or two, so look for that in your email. And with that, I do not see any other questions. Tracy and Brittany, thank you so very, very much for being here with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.